This is the Moza R12 and I really love it. So Moza sent the R12 and also this KS wheel for review. I'm really impressed with the wheelbase. With the KS wheel, I'm going against the grain. It is okay, but I'm not really that much impressed. By the way, I have an affiliate link with Moza in GT Omega. As always, this video is completely independent. They don't know what I'm going to say. A little bit of context. My story with Moza is a little bit strange. They've been sending equipment for a while to this channel, and every single batch I received, it has some sort of issues. On the first one, the CRP pedals didn't work, and also the R16 stopped being connected for some reason. Then on the second batch, the R9 started making huge electrical noises, and on this third one, the R12, I think it is okay, but this wheel, it's something loose, so the QC, the quality control, isn't really up there with Moza, at least in my experience for all the equipment that I received. In terms of the wheelbase, I think it is okay, but there's some sort of electrical noise that I'm told some wheels have, some don't. Regardless, last year when I did the R9 review, I had a few nitpicks with it regarding with the maturity of the wheelbase or in the maturity of the ecosystem. For the R12, I am glad to say that most of it, if not all of those issues, are resolved. The R12 follows a logical path for Moza. Basically, it is inserting itself into a place where there isn't really a lot of competition for more mature and wider appeal ecosystems. It's basically free real estate for them. They're going to a place where a lot of sim racers are asking. They don't want more power and they want something still relatively affordable. Speaking of prices, the R12 will have a price of $589 or Great British pounds, or around 649 euro plus taxes depending where you are. There isn't really much to talk about in terms of the unboxing experience. It's very straightforward, very Moza. There's really no bullshit. I love it because of how simple it is and how small are these boxes. Basically, you have just what you need. You have a power lead, you have the power supply, which in this case is 260 watts compared to the R9 180. You have, of course, the wheelbase inside. Then you have a small bag of 6mm bolts. I really love Moza boxing. They're small. The boxes are small and they have everything you're gonna need to start. It's basically just like this channel, so subscribe. The wheelbase is really tiny, just like any other Moza wheelbases thus far. The R12 has a useful cube-like shape. In the back, there are connectors for pedals, shifters, e-brakes, and also the USB. You have the power connector and the power button at the back. The R12 is only bottom mounted. There aren't any side mounting options. There are 4 M6 holes, which are very shallow, so you need to be careful with that. You can mount this on a desk with an optional desk clamp. And for your wheelbase, you can connect it, of course, to a wheel stand or a sim rig, but because the provided bolts are very shallow, you might require longer bolts, and because of that, you might require shims. I would recommend you to have shims at hand, because if they are too long and because these holes are very, very shallow, make sure you don't over tread them because it can damage the base. The QR is extremely sturdy. It is, for me, the best QR in sim racing of how practical it is and easy to use. It doesn't have or barely has any movement at all in the connection. And now they have a small improvement on the QR. It's not on the QR itself, but the wheelbase now on the QR system has a small arrow to indicate you where is the top of the wheel and the way you should connect the wheel to the QR system. So small quality of life improvements, which I really appreciate. One of the biggest improvements for me for the R12, it's really not the R12, but it's the software. It was usually my biggest nitpick with it, and I can tell you this has much improved. Despite all the flack I get for being critical of the Moza software, Moza doesn't really care about the criticisms, but rather the intent and what the criticism is about. Last year, I've said that the pit house was around 12 to 18 months behind the competition. Well, those 12 months have passed, and I can tell you they are essentially at the same level of other more mature implementations. Still, there are some nitpicks that I can say about the software, but they're generally about the translation options, not really about how the software works or the connection or integration with the titles. Some of the options aren't still well explained, but it shows that it has a lot of possibilities and flexibility for customizing your own personal force feedback feel. As of the explanations, you have game force feedback intensity or road sensitivity. There are essentially wheel maximum power and filtering or interpolation. That's for me the nitpick about the software, but there are really cool things about this, mainly the force feedback equalizer, which lets you increase or remove some of the force feedback effects. For example, going over the curbs, if you feel they are too aggressive, you can turn that down. And you can also change the force feedback curve. So for example, if you want to emulate non-power steering cars, you can do that from the software itself. All of these options create a really fantastic driving, so we should talk about the driving now. For me, most importantly, it is really possible to remove a lot, if not all, of the inherent signal filtering and remove most of the dampening for the driving. So that means in games like Assetto Corsa Competizione, and this was one of my biggest beefs with it and with this software back then, it is absolutely bonkers how much it has evolved and how it feels now. The force feedback feels crispy, responsive, detailed, and super fast in Assetto Corsa Competizione. If it feels too strong for you, you could just turn down the road effects to about 9 or 8, and that's basically the sweet spot for this title. For Assetto Corsa, it is the same deal. It's incredibly well detailed. It is a true representation of how godlike Assetto Corsa force feedback is. It is intuitive and connected to the road. It is as good as everything I've tried out there. Didn't try drifting though, because I don't have a USB shifter and handbrake, but if you would like to see a comparison between ecosystems for drifting just for that, let me know. Maybe I can try to arrange that. Automobilista 2 also seems to follow the force feedback improvement. If that's the game or Moza Pithouse, I don't know, but it does feel informative, connected to the road, and it's an absolute far cry from the past. I didn't try it on iRacing though, because I really didn't want to pay for the membership just to try this out, but if it is anything like the R9 or the R16, there's really no reason to believe it's gotten any worse, because the R16 and the R9 were excellent in iRacing. The force feedback went leaps and bounds in 1 year. If in the past for the R9 I couldn't wait to get away from it on the titles that I play, which is basically Assetto Corsa and Competizione, because I couldn't really feel the back end of the car. Now for the R12 and this iteration of the software and how much it has evolved, basically it is at the level of any other sim racing equipment developer as of this moment. It feels basically as intuitive, as interesting, as crisp, as responsive as any other thing that I've tried, either that be Fanatec, SimiCube, or even Logitech. This wheelbase is absolutely crazy. It is really, really good, and the force feedback feels completely different for me. The R12 just makes sense to me. It is sitting on a perfect spot for price to performance ratio on a direct drive market. 12 Newton meters will be plenty enough for most. Generally, I use mine between 5 to 7 depending on the wheelbase and depending if I'm drifting or not. And this is basically plenty of torque to give after that, and it doesn't really feel to be out of puff. 12 Newton meters is plenty enough for a wheel like the KS or the GS GT, and for the CS, the R9's 9 Newton meters was also plenty enough. With the KS wheel, the R12 is excellent value. I'm not too sold on the KS wheel itself, but I can see lots and lots of value on this wheel that will be explored on another video, so subscribe to keep up to date. Long story short, the R12, yeah, I wasn't expecting something this good. You really need to pay attention to this, and if you're in the market for something around this price, yeah, have a look at it, and I think you're gonna be impressed. I would like to thank all the channel members for the support, and if you'd like to support the channel and be part of the credits, why not support the channel itself? And if you would like to know how my opinion changed since last year, since the R9, why not check the R9 review? It's on this side.